My name's Ian Smith. I'm an insurance professional with over 22 years experience now working within insurance. Um, I've done many, many things within my career, starting as a frontline underwriter, moving through sales, onto leading a 28 branch network for personal lines, and then through into various operational roles, and where I find myself now, which is an expert within the divestment, legacy, and separation of insurance companies. So I specialize in Part 7 transfers, which means I get to engage with lots of different parts of businesses. My connection with Gain has been over many, many years, right from when Gain first started and I was at Zurich, and I've been supporting them ever since. I think this campaign is vital, and I love the way that encouraging different perspectives within the industry, we bring in fresh new talent because it's vitally important that we challenge the ways that we think, and especially with the likes of AI, robotics, and an ever evolving sector, bringing in the right talent, which means bringing in neurodivergent talent, is so important. So, why insurance? Insurance is often seen as boring, old fashioned, but actually, when you peel back the layers, it's a fast moving, highly complex industry that touches every part of everyone's life, from protecting homes, cars, and businesses to managing multi billion pound global risks. And then there's all the investment strategies on the back of that as well. So it's not just about underwriting and claims. You've got the core insurance functions. We've got actuarial, claims, underwriting, risk management, broking. But then you've also got the business operations, so finance, HR, marketing, compliance, regulation, technology, and data. We've got data science. I've already touched on AI, cybersecurity, and digital transformation. And then you've got the emerging roles and the support roles. So looking at the ESG, the environmental, social, and governance, diversity and inclusion, and AI and ethics in underwriting. The key to this is it's a bit like working in the NHS or the army. There's no one size fits all. There's no one career path, but there's opportunities that exist across the piece for apprentices, graduates, career changers, all within a wonderful framework of an ever evolving business. What's it like working in insurance as a neurodivergent individual? So I can only speak from my personal experience. My neurotype is different to a lot of people's neurotype. I'm a mixture of ASD, ADHD, dyslexia, and dyspraxia. But in my early career, I had no idea whatsoever that I was neurodivergent. I just knew I worked differently from my peers. My biggest challenges as I've worked through my career is probably procrastination and being overwhelmed. I didn't know why. And I think one of the things that helped me to understand me better was actually when I got my diagnosis. My first diagnosis came when I was about 49, and I got my second when I was 50. So well established into my career. And it was only at this point that it helped me understand my brain better rather than trying to fight it. So instead of forcing myself into neurotypical molds, I built systems that had worked for me. But I built these systems naturally of my entire career, taking on back feedback from my peers, from my managers and leaders, looking at ways to not necessarily fit the mold, because I think that goes against everything that we as a neurodivergent movement stand for, but more making sure that I could understand how I was perceived by others and what I needed to do to improve myself as a leader and a manager and as a colleague for those people that I was working with. Post diagnosis, one of the biggest life changes for me was Milton and the double empathy approach, which basically says that it's not on either one of us to change the way that we communicate, but it's incumbent upon us all to try and understand each other's perspectives and adapt. So therefore, I now am very open about my neurodivergent conditions. And I use my knowledge of Milton and also me to help explain to others what's the best way that I can communicate with you and what's the best way that you can communicate with me. And that's worked for me, certainly since the diagnosis, because it helped me help others to understand how I work and also to identify where there may be gaps between how we are interpreting the same bits of information. Now, one of the things I said just about as one of the challenges was procrastination. If you've ever seen Tim Urban's TED Talk, you'll know about the procrastination monkey. And many people with neurodivergent traits, and especially those of us with ADHD traits, struggle with executive function and task initiation. The monkey sits on your shoulder and it loves instant gratification. So we put off important work until panic mode kicks in, which when you're working in a business isn't really great. So what's the key? What's the difference? What do you need to do? So it was important for me to understand structure, clarity, and my own operating model. So I've learned from a very early stage within my insurance career that I've got to put everything in my diary. I've got to put in when it's due, when my appointments are, what my meetings are. I write everything down. Doesn't mean that I type all my minutes up, but I have everything written down so I can refer back to it to understand exactly what it is that I'm expected to do and by when or what I've committed to. And this has helped me to get that structure and clarity more so in my latter career than in my earlier career. So what is a day in my role like within insurance? So at the moment, I'm leading the Part 7 transaction and separation of the brands. What this involves is overseeing multi-million pound regulatory transfers. So I end up working on a daily basis with data analysts, looking at how the transforming portfolio is performing. I'm looking at it from a policyholder communication perspective because we're expected to write to all of the policyholders who are in scope of the transfer. Looking at any cross-border notifications, working with our legal teams, finance and operations. And then that's also working with the same teams at Royal Sun Alliance. So what we're looking to do is make sure that we have a well-structured approach to the transfer that is compliant, that is reviewed by an independent expert who is actually appointed to review the transfer and the scheme, and then to make sure that we're advising policyholders accordingly of what the transfer means to them, and at the same time ensuring that there's no detriment to any of our policyholders. Now, that's not where I started. I started as a frontline sales professional in a call center. I was selling home insurance to people who were completing on mortgages. And my career has just been a successive progression of new opportunities, pushing myself, but being given clear expectation, structured goals, and a supportive environment. I've been really lucky that I've had some wonderful managers and leaders who've accepted me for me. And I've always been quirky and I've always been unusual in the way that I approach things. I think one of the things that I'm really, really good at is seeing those gaps that not everybody else can put together. Picturing the big picture, being able to helicopter up and down from whether I'm right in the weeds in the detail or trying to go up to a much higher view and seeing where all the interfaces are that impact, especially now in my current role, all of the businesses that I'm engaging with and all the business units. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily customer facing. I am in the sense that I'm dealing with partners at Royal Sun Alliance in this instance, or with the external law firms, but I'm not the face of the customer or the face of the business talking out to the customer. So with insurance, not all roles require you to be social. and not every role expects you to be facing a customer. So I touched on earlier around some of the careers within insurance. Let me just deep dive, if I may, for a minute or two, on just what some of those roles are. So if we look at the core insurance roles, the roles that you'll all be familiar with, we've got the likes of underwriting. So this is the assessing and pricing the risk that is brought to us. Then we've got the claims handling. So when claims happen, it's being there to talk to the customers, manage the claim, and make sure that the settlements are paid out. Then we've got actuarial science. These are the brains behind insurance, either from a pricing or reserving perspective, where they use maths and statistics to calculate the probability of a risk and what premium should be charged for the initial policy. And also, if there's a claim, what kind of reserve should we be holding against the portfolio? Then we've got the risk management teams, identifying and mitigating financial risks. We've got insurance broking, hugely important within the UK market, advising businesses on their insurance coverage and making sure that they're doing a lot of the work for the insurers up front by assessing the underwriting risks that are attached. You've got the professional services and the corporate and business operations. So finance and accounting. You've got everything from management accounting through to the group treasury and investments, legal and compliance. So you've got risk regulation, compliance, ensuring that we meet all of our regulatory obligations, and not just from the PRA and the FCA, but also in relation to the likes of the Employers Liability Tracing Office, for example, for employers' liability lines of business that we write. Or you've got marketing and customer experience. How do we brand our businesses and how do we engage with our customers? What do we do to ensure that we're getting the right messages across? An area that I've worked in for a long, long time, project and change management, where you're driving some transformation projects. This could be anything from introducing a natural language processing chatbot, for example, using AI currently, through to some of the big transformation projects that I've done in the legacy and runoff space. Then we've got the tech and data focused roles, data science, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, insurtech, digital innovation, plus all of the fraud teams that are going on in the background. There's such a wealth of roles that are available for us that it can be challenging to find the right niche for you, but you can. And as I said earlier, we've got many entry routes into insurance. We've got apprenticeships where you can gain the qualifications while you're working. There are many graduate schemes, and a lot of the tier one insurers and others offer rotational type programs across multiple departments so that you get, as a graduate, an experience of the different flavors of all of the departments that are operational within an insurance company. And then we've also got the direct to entry. So this is your career changes. And this is fascinating because most of the skills that we have are cross-transferable, especially when you're looking at finance, law, IT, data science, and even psychology. So huge opportunities for a lot of roles that are available within insurance. How do we support neurodivergent talent within the recruitment and onboarding process? So when I was lucky enough to do an MSc with Cranfield through a Zurich apprenticeship, I was able to look at how do we do this exact same thing as my thesis. Some of the key facts that we pulled out was that there's an over-reliance on traditional interviews. Now, traditional interviews, for those of us who think slightly different, our brains are wired differently, the competency-based, where you have to provide a star answer to your questions, often penalize those of us who struggle with verbal communication or on-the-spot thinking. So one of the things I've been promoting and pushing for is a change and a move away from these competency-based interviews to more of a skills-based interviews. Then we've got unclear job descriptions and ambiguous roles that create barriers. Must be a great communicator. Do you have to be if you're a data scientist who spends your entire time reviewing data and looking at your screen? And you need to be able to ensure that, yes, you are communicating, but that can be in numeric form rather than verbal form. So some unclear job descriptions, they do create these barriers. And then we've got that sensory and social challenges, and this is where I think employers in the UK as a whole have a lot to do, not just insurance, but it's the likes of open plan offices. For those of us with an ADHD brain, they can be very distracting. For those of us who have the ASD traits, they can be noisy and overwhelming. And when you don't have your own desk and you're expected to hot desk, unexpected last minute changes can affect really quite badly how we feel when we get into the office and where we're sitting because we've lost that certainty that we need. So I think there's a lot more that companies can be doing to look at how they support neurodivergent individuals within their business, being very mindful that not one size fits all. So companies can help by a structured hiring process, providing interview questions in advance. Now, this is good, but I've learned from my experience, if you provide the questions in advance and you don't ask them in the same order, it's not as good. So there are many things that we still have to learn as we're doing these adaptations. We can look at skills-based assessments. We can do alternative assessment methods. So this could be written or video responses instead of a traditional Q&A. We can give candidates time to think, but we have to make sure that it is a clear and fair playing field for all candidates and that we don't create unnecessary, unfair advantages for any one population group. When you do start, it's then clear on both yourself and the company to talk about any onboarding adjustments. So what are the role expectations? Making sure that we've got buddy systems in place and making sure that any flexible working arrangements are well documented and supported. It's an individual choice whether or not you disclose to your employer or your manager. But I would recommend that you do so that you can get the right support. But it is a personal choice at the end of the day because I've heard wonderful stories of great support from wonderful managers and leaders. But I've also heard the flip side of that where people have not given the right support. So that is very much a personal choice and something that we need to work harder on as an industry to ensure that all of our managers are trained to give the right support. I think certainly one of the things that was a big win joining the Zurich when I did was finding the employee networks that there are out there. So we've got within most tier ones, women's innovation type networks. We've got networks to support LGBTQ+. We've got networks to support cultural awareness, and then also these emerging neurodivergent and disability and support networks. They vary between companies, but generally you've got peer-to-peer support and you've got access to mentoring and you've got people who will be there fighting your corner like me, trying to make sure that workplaces are a better place for us all to work. So, what's my final reflections? I think that this really matters because neurodivergent talent is an untapped competitive advantage for any business, not just within insurance, but any business. Because of the way that we think differently, because of the ways that we process information differently, we can make a real difference and make sure that this competitive advantage is brought to bear. Insurance is changing. Embracing diversity is no longer an option, it's a requirement. So the insurance companies must start doing this and must start supporting us. So for me, if you're neurodivergent, leverage your strengths. Don't force yourself into neurotypical molds, but also be mindful that it is a two-way street, that communication is both to you and from you. So we need to make sure that people understand you and you understand what's required. If you're an employer, reevaluate your hiring and support practices. And this is really important because you are discriminating currently if you're doing your competency-based questions against some of the best candidates that you will ever speak to, but possibly will not be taken forwards because they're not skilled enough, but they have the right knowledge and experience to ace the roles that you're recruiting for. Insurance has a room for everyone, and that includes you.